Colorado River flows once again to Gulf of California. In late spring, Antonia Torres González tears rolled freely at the rare sight before her. The Colorado River flowed again in what is usually a parched delta. Torres González, a member of the Cucapá tribe who grew up in the river delta, couldn't help but relive memories of childhood romps in the once-lush waterway in northwestern Mexico. It was like seeing the river come back to life, she says. On May 1, 2021, the river once again flowed in its delta thanks to an agreement between the United States and Mexico dubbed Minute 323. Through October 11, a total of 35,000 acre-feet of water, 11.4 billion gallons, will be released downstream from Morelos Dam on the U.S. Mexico border to quench the thirst of this long-withered ecosystem. The mammoth endeavor to rejuvenate the river delta was years in the making and involved dozens of people, including water managers, policymakers, scientists, conservationists, and non-profits from both sides of the border. We provide a lot of brainpower and blood, sweat, and tears, and commitment to this, says Nancy Smith, Colorado River Program Conservation Director at the Nature Conservancy. The decades-long deterioration of the Colorado River Delta began with the diversion of most of its water to farms and growing city populations in the United States, and by the early 1960s, very little flow made it to the river's lower reaches. Under 1944 treaty, 1.5 million acre-feet of water, about 10% of the river's annual flow, was required to reach Mexico each year, though most of that drenches farmland in the valley of Mexicali, Baja California, without ever reaching the delta that should reconnect the river to the Gulf of California, also known as the Sea of Cortez. Recent agreements between the countries, including this year's pulse as well as another 8-week pulse of water back in 2014, ensure collaboration in restoring the delta and managing river water, sharing surpluses and shortages. The restoration work that grassroots organizers jump-started in the delta region some 2 decades ago, including the removal of non-native vegetation and reforestation of thousands of acres of willow, cottonwood, and mesquite trees, would in time become a key factor in the cross-border undertaking. We had a vision that someday the Colorado River could be connected again to the sea and to local communities, says Francisco Zamora of the Sonoran Institute in Tucson, Arizona. The nonprofit, which also has offices in Mexicali, works with communities to revive dying ecosystems. To see the river flowing into the delta today, albeit temporarily, gives him hope that local communities may one day again rely on it for sustenance and recreation. Over the years, restoration work not only has provided local residents with jobs, but also inspired them to believe that the delta can flourish again. Zamora says seeing the river flowing has reinforced that notion, even for young people who had never seen it happen before. It's not only about wildlife, or birds and trees, he says. It's also about the people. People-centered Conservation Torres González remembers the Colorado River Delta as an abundant source of water that sustained multiple generations of Cucapá families living on its banks. When I was a child, the river was still flowing, she says. We bathed in it, we played games, we fished there. We used to drink water from the river, and most of our families used the water to do the wash and for other household chores. Gradually, the fish and the water flows diminished, as did the lush, native trees and other vegetation that families traditionally used for food and medicine, recalls the tribal elder who now lives in a Mexicali neighborhood. We no longer consume what grew naturally in the wetlands that were there, Torres González says. This year's water delivery will allow nearby communities to enjoy the river again for 5 months and directly benefits about 700 acres of restored landscape, Zamora says. This is an area where you can find many species of birds, and some are what we call target species, like the yellow-billed cuckoo. To thrive, target species require mature cottonwood and willow forest, so their presence in the delta is a good indicator that the habitat is improving and suitable for such birds, he says. The Sonoran Institute and the Nature Conservancy are part of Raise the River, a coalition of environmental groups from Mexico and the U.S. working to restore the river delta. The Colorado River Delta used to cover 2 million acres, Smith says. It was this vast, watery landscape teeming with birds really quite